Trish from Taps HR here, just with a quick video on probationary periods. So I've had a couple of questions from my clients recently around how probationary periods work, and I thought it would make sense to just put together a really short video to hopefully clear some of those questions up and do a little bit of good. So if you're new to my channel, hello, welcome. Do feel free to like and subscribe to this video. If you're enjoying my content, that's awesome. And if there's anything that you think I could be covering that I haven't done, feel free to pop it in the comments and I'll do my best in terms of creating other videos. So probationary periods. So a really simplistic way to describe them is they're a period of time whereby the employee and the employer gets a chance to kind of try out the new role and see how things fit and see how things work for them. You'd expect there to be kind of a more intensive period of supporting an employee during a probationary period, and you'd spend more time kind of checking in on them, making sure they're okay and making sure they're embedded within the organisation. Probationary periods are really, really important for organisations. So when you've done all that really hard work in terms of finding the right candidate and bringing them to the organisation, what you don't want to do is get them in and then have all of that hard work fall away because you haven't provided that kind of support and guidance to somebody in terms of onboarding them to your organisation. So my first tip for organisations is always make sure that the employee's journey in terms of joining you as in your organisation doesn't stop the minute that they've signed their contract and they join you. It's kind of an ongoing, flowing process, and you need to make sure that that onboarding process is really slick so that you don't lose people during that period. So we've got what is a probationary period. The next question I always get is how long should probationary periods be? And what I would say is that depends on usually the seniority of the role. So if I was recruiting for a senior director or a senior manager within an organisation, I would expect their probationary period to be something between kind of 3 to 6 months. Mostly because, typically you would have spent a longer period of time trying to recruit a senior person into your organisation, but equally because of kind of the scale and the level of the sorts of work that they'll do, it's more likely that you won't start to see the payoff to that from that kind of work until they've been there a little bit longer, so that you can kind of get a better feel for how they work and how they are as an employee. For kind of other positions that aren't necessarily senior, maybe not necessarily managerial, I would say a probationary period of anything from kind of 1 month to 3 months kind of makes sense as well. Another thing that you probably need to bear in mind is how probationary periods will impact and affect whether or not somebody wants to come to work for you. So if you've got a really kind of exhaustingly long notice period and it's not for somebody who's in a senior role, that might be something that will put somebody off working for you. So whilst it might be great for you because you'll have a little bit more flexibility, it's probably not going to be attractive to candidates coming to work for you. So make sure that you're proportionate in terms of how long that you think your probationary periods need to be within your organisation. The next question I get a lot is, what do I do when someone's underperforming during a probationary period? And my answer to that is, provide the necessary support that you feel you need to. If you have a well-written probationary period clause within your contract, you will have a bit more flexibility in terms of how you can deal with someone who's underperforming during their probationary period. So typically, you would have something that says that your disciplinary process, for example, doesn't apply during someone's probationary period. So if somebody was being a little bit naughty and somebody wasn't performing in the way that you wanted them to, you could potentially exit them quicker from the organisation during their probationary period. But my advice is always, make sure that you're doing the right thing and that you're supporting your employees to the level that you should be, whether they're in their probationary period or not. Another question that I get a lot is how much notice does somebody need to give if they are in their probationary period? And again, that's something that you should stipulate within your contract of employment. So it should be really clear if there's a difference between the notice that they need to give during their probationary period and the notice that they need to give when they're a fully fledged and confirmed employee. Legally speaking, once somebody's worked for you for a period of a month, then they are entitled to a minimum of 1 week's notice. So what I would usually say to my clients is just set it as a minimum of 1 week all the way through, if that's what you want to do, then that kind of covers you. But obviously, if you want to be a great and a kind of attractive employer, you probably would have a shorter notice period during their probation. So whether that's 1 week, 2 weeks, or whatever you decide to go for. And then after somebody completes their probation, then your notice period would be longer. There are obviously statutory notice periods within the UK. I'll pop those down in the comments as well, or I'll pop you a link to an article that will tell you a little bit more about that, because in the UK, the longer your length of service, the longer that kind of statutory period of notice is as well. I think that's pretty much everything in terms of probationary periods. So we've covered off what they are. We've talked a little bit about how long they should be. We've talked a bit about what happens when somebody is in their probationary period and they want to leave. It might also be worth talking about what happens if somebody leaves and they refuse to give you notice during their probationary period. So this is a really, really tricky question, because on the one hand, you'll have a contract of employment with somebody that clearly sets out what their notice periods are, but then you might, as an employer, be in a situation whereby someone says, do you know what, I'm going, see you later. And I get questions around this a fair amount, around what can you do as an organisation and how can you kind of fix that. And the short answer, unfortunately for employers, is there's not too much that you can do. If somebody says that they want to leave your organisation, they're letting you clearly know that they're going, and they're not going to work their notice period, short of you forcing someone to come in, which obviously I would not recommend, please don't do that, there's very little that you can do to make someone work if they don't want to work for you. Now, obviously that represents a breach of their contract with you, and it's not great for you. And you need to make sure that your contracts are robust in terms of kind of what you expect in terms of notice periods. Your only real remedy, though, is to try and take that person to court and obtain damages for what you would have lost because they've left you in the lurch. But in most cases, that situation kind of will cost you more than kind of just letting the person go. So whilst it sucks and it's not great for employers when people do that, unfortunately there's not too much of a remedy when somebody does do that. I think what I would recommend, though, is obviously work with the employee, see where there can be a little bit of flex with them. If there's an opportunity for you to keep them a little bit longer so that they can help you out. I think, we're in a kind of people business when you're working with employees, so see what you can do to work with them. But it is quite a tricky one, because it's difficult to kind of force anyone to do something when they're openly telling you that they don't want to. So I think that's pretty much everything on probationary periods. If anyone's got any questions or queries or anything they want to go through, then please feel free to get in contact with me. You can email me via hithere@taphr.co.uk. You can visit our website, fill in the contact form, and I'll be more than happy to come back to you. So I hope you have fabulous days. I hope that's been helpful. And if there's anything that we can do for you over at TAP HR, please do let us know.